Hello everyone, and welcome back. Today, we're diving deep into how learning actually works inside the brain. Many people struggle with math, science, or any complex subject and assume they're simply not smart enough. But what if that belief is completely wrong? Today, we're going to explore the science of learning itself, how your brain forms understanding, why confusion is normal, and why stepping away from a problem can actually make you smarter. Barbara, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, James. I'm really happy to be here, especially to talk about something so important, how people learn and why they often misunderstand their own abilities.
Let's start with this simple but powerful question. Why do so many people believe they're just bad at math or not built for technical subjects?
Because learning feels uncomfortable, especially in the beginning. When people encounter confusion, mental strain, or slow progress, they interpret that as a lack of ability. But in reality, those feelings are signs that learning is happening. The brain is literally building new neural structures. That process takes effort, energy, and time. It's like building new roads in a city. At first, everything feels slow and messy. But once the roads are built, movement becomes smooth and fast.
So the discomfort isn't failure, it's construction.
Exactly. Learning is biological change, and biological change never feels effortless at the beginning.
Your work explains that our brain operates in two very different thinking modes. This idea is one of the most powerful concepts for understanding learning. Can you explain these two modes?
Of course. The brain shifts between two primary mental states when learning: focused mode and diffuse mode. Both are essential. Most people rely too heavily on one and ignore the other.
Let's begin with focused mode. What exactly is happening there?
Focused mode is what most people think of as real studying. You are actively concentrating. You're solving a math problem. You're analyzing a concept. You're trying to understand step-by-step logic. Neurologically, focused mode uses tightly connected neural pathways, patterns you already know or are actively forming in a structured way. It's precise, controlled, effortful, but it's also limited.
Limited how?
Focused thinking tends to stay inside familiar patterns. It follows logical sequences. That's helpful for step-by-step work, but not for making big conceptual connections. If you don't already see how ideas connect, focused mode alone may not help you discover the connection. That's when diffuse mode becomes critical.
This is the part many people find surprising, that stepping away from work can actually help learning. What is diffuse mode?
Diffuse mode activates when your attention relaxes. You're not intensely concentrating. Maybe you're walking, showering, daydreaming, exercising. Your brain is still working, but in a much broader, more relaxed way. Instead of tight logical paths, the brain begins exploring wider networks. It starts connecting distant ideas, things that didn't seem related before. This is where insight happens.
So those sudden aha moments, they come from diffuse mode?
Very often, yes. When people say, "I stopped thinking about the problem and suddenly the answer appeared," that's diffuse processing finishing the work that focused mode couldn't complete alone.
Many students believe success means sitting for hours, pushing through non-stop. What happens when someone stays only in focused mode for too long?
Mental fatigue, reduced creativity, shallow understanding. Without breaks, the brain becomes rigid. It keeps repeating the same mental approach, even if that approach isn't working. Diffuse mode needs time to operate. Without it, learning becomes mechanical rather than conceptual.
So rest isn't laziness, it's a cognitive requirement.
Exactly. Strategic rest is part of effective learning.
Let's talk about something extremely important, what you call the illusion of competence. Many people feel like they understand something while studying, but later they can't recall or apply it. Why does this happen?
Because recognition is not the same as recall. When you reread notes or watch explanations, the material feels familiar. Your brain says, "Yes, I've seen this before." But familiarity is passive. Real learning requires active retrieval, pulling the information from memory without help. If you can't explain it without looking, you don't truly know it yet.
That explains why students feel confident while reviewing, but freeze during exams.
Exactly. The brain mistakes exposure for mastery.
Many learners fear confusion. They want clarity immediately. But your research suggests confusion plays an important role.
Yes, confusion signals that the brain is restructuring knowledge. When old mental patterns don't fit new information, the brain experiences conflict. That conflict is uncomfortable, but essential. If everything feels easy, you're probably operating only inside existing knowledge. True learning requires stretching beyond it.
So difficulty is not a warning sign, it's a growth signal.
Precisely.
Why do people procrastinate when facing difficult subjects like math or physics?
Because confusion triggers discomfort, and the brain tries to avoid discomfort. When we anticipate mental strain, the brain generates resistance, a subtle emotional push away from the task. Procrastination is not laziness, it's an emotional regulation strategy.
So people avoid the feeling, not the work itself.
Correct. Once they start working, the discomfort often fades quickly, but starting is the hardest part.
If you had to summarize learning biologically, how would you describe it?
Learning is the formation and strengthening of neural connections. At first, connections are weak, like thin threads. With repetition and practice, they become thicker, faster, and more efficient. Eventually, complex skills feel automatic because the neural pathways are strong and well organized.
That means intelligence is not fixed, it's built.
Yes, skill is largely the result of structured practice over time.
Let's summarize what we've learned today. The brain has two thinking modes, focused and diffuse. Both are necessary for deep understanding. Breaks and rest improve learning. Confusion is a normal part of brain growth. Familiarity is not mastery. Learning physically changes the brain. Did I miss anything?
That's an excellent summary. I would only add this. Anyone can learn complex subjects if they understand how learning actually works.
That's powerful. In the next episode, we go from theory to action. We'll explore specific techniques to learn faster, remember longer, and build strong mental chunks of knowledge. Barbara, thank you for this fascinating discussion.
Thank you, James. Looking forward to the next conversation.
And to our listeners, keep learning, keep exploring, and we'll see you in the next episode. Welcome back, everyone. In the last episode, we explored how the brain learns, the focused mode, the diffuse mode, and why confusion is actually part of progress. Today, we move from theory to practice. How do we actually learn faster, remember more, and understand complex ideas deeply? Barbara, where should we begin?
Let's begin with one of the most important concepts in learning, something that completely changes how skills are built. That concept is chunking.
This word comes up often in discussions about learning, but what exactly is a chunk?
A chunk is a compact mental unit, a collection of information that your brain treats as a single idea. When you first encounter new material, everything feels separate and overwhelming. But with practice, the brain groups related pieces together into one meaningful structure. That structure is a chunk.
So chunking is how complexity becomes manageable.
Exactly. Let's take an example. Imagine someone learning to drive a car for the first time. At the beginning, they must consciously think about everything. Hands on the wheel, mirrors, pedals, speed, signals, road signs. Each action is separate and mentally exhausting. But with practice, all those separate actions become one smooth behavior, driving. That smooth behavior is a chunk.
So experts aren't necessarily processing more information, they've simply compressed information into powerful chunks.
Yes, experts see patterns beginners cannot see because their knowledge is organized into meaningful structures.
How do we actually build chunks? Is repetition enough?
Repetition is necessary but not sufficient. Chunk formation requires 3 key steps. Focused attention. You must give full concentration when first learning the material. Understanding meaning. Memorization without understanding creates weak chunks. Practice and recall. You must actively retrieve and use the information. Without recall, chunks don't stabilize.
So simply rereading notes doesn't build strong chunks.
Correct. Rereading feels productive, but it's mostly passive recognition. Strong chunks form through active engagement.
Many people practice by repeating the same type of problem again and again. Is that effective?
Only partly. Repeating identical tasks builds familiarity, but it can also create rigidity. The brain learns one pattern but struggles when the situation changes. To build flexible knowledge, learners must practice in varied contexts. This forces the brain to understand underlying principles, not just memorize procedures.
So variation strengthens understanding.
Yes, it prevents mechanical learning and encourages conceptual learning.
You mentioned active recall earlier. Why is recalling information from memory so powerful?
Because recall strengthens neural pathways far more than passive review. When you retrieve information without looking, the brain must reconstruct the entire pathway. That effort reinforces the structure. Each successful recall makes the memory faster and more stable.
So testing yourself is not just evaluation, it's learning itself.
Exactly. Retrieval practice is one of the most effective learning techniques ever studied.
Many people highlight textbooks and reread pages repeatedly. Does that help?
It creates a feeling of learning, but often very little actual retention. Highlighting can be useful if it helps identify key ideas, but if learners never test themselves, the information remains fragile. The brain needs struggle to strengthen memory.
Another powerful strategy is spacing learning over time. Why does spacing work better than cramming?
Because memory strengthens through repeated reconstruction, not continuous exposure. When you review material after some time has passed, the brain must rebuild the memory again. That rebuilding process deepens learning. Cramming creates short-term familiarity but weak long-term storage. Spacing creates durable knowledge.
So slight forgetting before reviewing is actually helpful.
Yes, slight forgetting makes retrieval effortful, and effort strengthens memory.
Let's talk about a practical method many learners use: short, focused work sessions with breaks. Why is this effective?
Because it respects how natural attention functions. Most people cannot maintain deep focus for long periods. Short sessions, around 25 minutes, allow intense concentration without burnout. Then, a brief break allows diffuse mode to activate. This rhythm supports both mental clarity and long-term endurance.
So structured breaks are part of cognitive optimization.
Exactly. Learning improves when focus and rest alternate.
Many people keep practicing a skill they already understand, thinking more repetition always helps. Is that efficient?
Only partly. Overlearning one narrow skill can reduce time available to develop new chunks. Balance is important. Once something is reasonably stable, shift attention to new material, but revisit old material periodically to maintain strength.
Another powerful strategy is mixing different types of problems instead of grouping identical ones together. Why does that help?
Because it trains the brain to choose the correct method, not just apply the most recent one. Real-world problems don't arrive labeled. Interleaving forces recognition, selection, and adaptation. This builds flexible intelligence.
If someone wants deep mastery, not just passing exams, what is the most important habit?
Explaining ideas in simple language without notes. If you can explain it clearly, you truly understand it. If you cannot explain it simply, the chunk is incomplete.
Let's summarize today's major insights. Knowledge becomes powerful when organized into chunks. Active recall strengthens memory more than passive review. Spaced repetition builds long-term retention. Short, focused sessions improve concentration. Mixed practice builds flexible understanding. Explaining ideas reveals true mastery. Barbara, anything to add?
Yes, learning is not about time spent. It's about how the brain is engaged during that time. Structure beats effort alone.
That's a powerful idea. In the next episode, we'll tackle one of the biggest enemies of learning, procrastination, why we avoid difficult work, how fear interferes with thinking, and how to build consistent discipline. Barbara, thank you again.
My pleasure. See you next time.
And thank you to our listeners. Keep building strong mental structures, one chunk at a time. Welcome back, everyone. In our last episode, we explored practical learning techniques: chunking, active recall, spaced repetition, and structured practice. Today, we're going to talk about something every learner experiences, but few truly understand: procrastination. Why do we delay important work, even when we know it matters? Why do difficult subjects trigger avoidance? And how can we actually break this cycle? Barbara, let's begin with the big question. Is procrastination really just laziness?
No, not at all. Procrastination is not a time management problem. It's an emotional regulation problem. When people face something challenging, especially mentally demanding work, the brain's pain-related networks can activate. The task feels threatening, even if it isn't physically dangerous. Procrastination becomes a quick way to reduce that discomfort.
So when someone avoids studying, they're actually avoiding the emotional experience of struggle.
Exactly. Neuroscience research shows that when we anticipate difficult work, the brain's pain-related networks can activate. The task feels threatening, even if it isn't physically dangerous. Procrastination becomes a quick way to reduce that discomfort.
You describe procrastination as a habit loop. How does that work?
Like most habits, procrastination follows a predictable cycle. Cue, something triggers discomfort. Example, opening a difficult textbook. Routine, avoidance behavior. Checking phone, social media, snacks, anything else. Reward, temporary relief. The discomfort disappears. Briefly. This relief reinforces the behavior. The brain learns, avoiding this task makes me feel better, and the habit strengthens.
So the brain is being trained to escape challenge.
Yes, and the more often you escape, the stronger the habit becomes.
Many people say once they begin working, it's not so bad. Why is starting the most difficult moment?
Because anticipation amplifies discomfort. Before beginning, the brain imagines effort, confusion, and frustration. That expectation triggers resistance. But once you start, the brain adapts. The emotional intensity drops. The task becomes manageable. That's why overcoming the first few minutes is so critical.
So the battle is mostly psychological, before the work even begins.
Exactly.
How can people break this pattern? What's the most effective strategy?
Focus on process, not outcome. When people think about results, finishing the chapter, mastering the topic, achieving perfection, the task feels overwhelming. But if they focus only on the process, I will study for 25 minutes, the emotional barrier becomes much smaller.
So instead of finishing the mountain, just take one step.
Yes, the brain tolerates small commitments much better than large ones.
Is this why short, timed sessions are so effective?
Exactly. When you commit to working for a limited period, like 25 minutes, the brain knows the discomfort has an endpoint. That makes starting easier. And once you begin, momentum often carries you forward.
If procrastination is a habit, does that mean we must replace the behavior, not just resist it?
Correct. You can't simply eliminate a habit loop. You must substitute a new routine when the cue appears. For example, cue, feeling of stress about studying. Old routine, open social media. New routine, start a 25-minute focus session. Over time, the brain associates relief with productive action instead of avoidance.
Another powerful barrier is fear, especially fear of failure. How does that connect to procrastination?
Fear increases emotional discomfort, which strengthens avoidance. Perfectionism is especially dangerous. When people believe their work must be flawless, starting becomes terrifying. Any mistake feels unacceptable, so they delay, sometimes indefinitely.
So perfectionism is not high standards, it's paralysis.
Exactly. True learning requires mistakes. Errors are information. They show where understanding is incomplete. Avoiding mistakes means avoiding growth.
Many high achievers are extremely self-critical. Does that help performance?
Surprisingly, no. Harsh self-judgment increases stress and reduces cognitive flexibility. It makes the brain defensive rather than exploratory. Self-compassion, treating yourself with patience during difficulty, supports persistence and resilience. Learning improves when the mind feels safe to experiment and fail.
Many people use visualization. Does imagining success help motivation?
Yes, but only if combined with realism. Effective motivation includes two parts: visualizing a positive future and acknowledging real obstacles. This is called mental contrasting. It prepares the brain to face difficulty rather than being surprised by it.
How much does environment influence procrastination?
Enormously. Willpower is limited, environment is powerful. If distractions are easily accessible, resisting them consumes mental energy. But if distractions are removed, focus becomes natural. Designing your environment is more reliable than relying on self-control alone.
Is discipline something people either have or don't have?
No, discipline is built gradually through repeated action. Each time you begin work despite resistance, you weaken the avoidance habit and strengthen the action habit. Consistency rewires the brain.
So let's summarize today's essential insights. Procrastination is emotional avoidance, not laziness. Starting is the hardest moment because anticipation amplifies discomfort. Focusing on process reduces overwhelm. Short work sessions make action easier. Habits must be replaced, not suppressed. Mistakes are necessary for learning. Environment shapes behavior more than willpower. Discipline is built through repetition. Barbara, anything to add?
Yes, progress doesn't require perfect motivation. It requires beginning, even when motivation is low. Action comes before motivation, not after.
That's powerful. In our final episode, we'll explore memory, long-term mastery, and how to become a lifelong learner, someone who can adapt, grow, and continuously build knowledge. Barbara, thank you again.
Thank you, James. Looking forward to our final discussion.
And to everyone listening, remember, the hardest step is starting. Once you begin, learning takes over. See you in the final episode. Welcome back to the final episode of our deep dive into how learning really works. So far, we've explored how the brain processes information, how to build strong knowledge structures, and how to overcome procrastination and fear. Today, we're going to bring everything together by answering one final question. How do we build lasting mastery? How do we remember what we learned, not just for days or weeks, but for years? And how do we become lifelong learners in a world that constantly changes? Barbara, let's begin with memory itself. What actually determines whether something stays in long-term memory?
Long-term memory depends on three core processes. Attention, you must focus clearly when first learning something. Meaning, the information must connect to understanding. Reinforcement over time. Memories must be revisited and used. Without reinforcement, even well-understood material fades. Memory is not storage like a computer, it's reconstruction. Each time you recall something, you rebuild it. That rebuilding process strengthens the memory.
People often get discouraged when they forget things they studied carefully. Why does forgetting happen so quickly?
Because forgetting is a natural and necessary process. The brain constantly filters information. If everything were stored permanently, the system would become overloaded. For memory to become durable, it must prove its importance through repeated use. In other words, what you revisit survives.
So forgetting isn't failure, it's part of selection.
Exactly. Memory is competitive. Frequently used knowledge becomes strong. Unused knowledge fades.
One of the most surprising things in learning science is the role of sleep. Why is sleep so critical for memory?
Because during sleep, the brain reorganizes information gathered during the day. It strengthens important neural connections and removes unnecessary ones. This process is called memory consolidation. Without enough sleep, learning remains incomplete. You may understand something during the day, but it won't fully stabilize in memory.
So, studying late into the night while sacrificing sleep actually damages learning.
Yes, sleep is not lost time. It's active processing time for the brain.
What about physical activity? Does movement influence learning?
Very much. Exercise increases blood flow to the brain, supports neural growth, and improves mood regulation. All of these enhance cognitive function. Learning is not just mental, it's biological. The brain depends on the health of the body.
Earlier, we talked about chunks, but how do individual chunks become deep expertise?
Through integration. As you learn more, separate chunks connect into networks. These networks allow rapid pattern recognition and flexible thinking. Experts don't just know many things, they know how things relate. That interconnected structure allows intuition.
So expertise is not just accumulation, it's organization.
Exactly.
Some learners become very strong in one narrow method, but struggle when situations change. Why does that happen?
Because they build rigid knowledge rather than adaptable knowledge. True mastery requires the ability to shift perspectives, apply concepts in new contexts, and rethink assumptions. This is why varied practice, mixed problems, and exposure to different approaches are essential.
As people become more knowledgeable, they sometimes become overly confident. Is that dangerous?
Yes, overconfidence reduces curiosity. When learners believe they already understand everything, they stop questioning. But questioning is the engine of growth. The best learners maintain intellectual humility. They remain open to correction and new perspectives.
Let's talk about lifelong learning. What separates people who continue growing from those who stop?
Several psychological habits: comfort with not knowing, willingness to make mistakes, curiosity about how things work, patience with slow progress, consistent practice over long periods. Lifelong learners don't chase perfection, they chase improvement.
Does learning accelerate over time?
Yes, knowledge compounds. Each new skill makes future learning easier because you have more mental structures to connect with. Early effort often feels slow, but over time, growth becomes exponential.
Does self-identity influence learning success?
Very strongly. When people see themselves as someone who learns, effort becomes natural. Learning becomes part of who they are, not just something they do occasionally. Identity drives consistency.
Some learners burn out after intense effort. How can people sustain learning for years?
By respecting mental energy cycles. Deep learning requires focused work, rest and recovery, sleep, physical movement, and emotional balance. Sustainable learning is rhythmic, not constant.
Many experts say teaching others deepens understanding. Why?
Because teaching requires organizing knowledge clearly, identifying gaps in understanding, explaining concepts simply, and answering unexpected questions. Teaching forces complete mental integration. If you want mastery, teach.
If you had to give a simple lifelong learning framework, what would it be?
Here is a powerful cycle: focus, practice, recall, rest, repeat. Over time, this cycle builds deep, stable, flexible knowledge.
Let's summarize everything from this final episode. Memory strengthens through repeated use. Forgetting is natural and necessary. Sleep consolidates learning. Physical health supports mental performance. Expertise grows through connected knowledge. Curiosity sustains lifelong learning. Identity shapes behavior. Teaching deepens mastery. Learning compounds over time. Barbara, any final message for learners everywhere?
Yes, learning is not about talent. It's about process, persistence, and patience. Your brain is designed to grow. If you follow how it naturally learns, progress is inevitable.
That's a perfect conclusion. Thank you, Barbara, for guiding us through the science of learning, from how the brain works, to how we practice, to how we grow over a lifetime.
Thank you, James. It's been a pleasure.
And to everyone listening, learning is not a phase, it's a lifelong journey. Stay curious, stay patient,
and keep building your mind, one idea at a time. See you next time.